incarnation from the left wing. Pretty timely, I think. I know I've been. It's interesting when you got that digital clock right in front of you, as opposed to at the synagogue. It's a little slippery in terms of time. I don't really have my phone with me in the sanctuary, and there's a clock, but I don't always look at it. So, and people are coming in, so we hardly ever start right on time on the dot. Sometimes for Havdalah, bar and bat mitzvahs, but other than that, we kind of don't start on time, which is fine, and it doesn't bother me. It might bother some people. I think other people are fine with it. But anyway, here in the home studio, with services and with these broadcasts and our adult education, I don't know if anyone has sort of been cognizant of it, but we've been starting on time, on the dot. And so right at noon, I click the start streaming button, and off we go. So so this is from the left wing. I'll talk a little bit more about it in general, just for I guess posterity. There's my dog Tipper having a word, getting his voice in the mix. So I guess that's also that doesn't happen at the synagogue very very often. The dog making their presence known. Okay, so from the left wing, this is been doing this roughly twice a week, with one or two or three maybe exceptions, since Passover, since right in the middle of Passover. I think I started at Chol HaMoed. I kind of remember was going to start, I think on the day, I think it was Tuesday, was morning before the Seder, and just kind of decided that I felt, everybody was getting ready for their Zoom Seders, and we were getting ready for our Zoom Seder, and all kinds of things were going on because it was Passover. Even though it was quarantine Passover, it still was Passover, a lot of preparation. And so I think I started, the next week. It was still the week of Passover, but after the Seder. So that's mid-April, for sure. And we've been doing this, and this is episode 18, although it's also, I guess, 19, since I'm going to read two of the columns today, because I had two left, and I kind of wanted to end on the end of the week as opposed to like leaving us hanging on a Tuesday. That's much more my Mishigas than anything to do with anybody really caring, I'm sure, and I know, but I care. So ending on a Thursday, and what I like about that 18 plus 1, there's kind of this whole sort of 7 is a holy number, and then there's 7 plus 1, so there's 8 nights of Hanukkah, and so 18 is a sacred number in Jewish sort of spirituality. I think a lot of people know this, but the reason is because every number in Hebrew has every letter in Hebrew has a numerical kind of equivalent or a number assigned to it, mostly based on the number, the alphabet. But there's a whole sort of field of spirituality, or whole area of spirituality called gematria, which is sort of playing around with those letters and numbers and making meaning out of numerology. I think is sort of the weird English word that's often used to translate gematria. I don't know if it's that weird, but it's not. It's infrequently used, right? Numerology, gematria. So there's this whole sort of area of making meaning out of the fact that the letters have numbers and kind of combining math with midrash. Anyway, so one of the really basic ones, one that's all still kind of out there in Jewish, contemporary Jewish culture, aside from sort of the pocket of people who study these things, is 18. Because if you break down 18 to 10 plus 8, which you certainly can do, the 10th letter of the Hebrew alphabet is the Yud, and the 8th letter is the Chet, and Chet and Yud is a word, Chai, which many people know, even many non-Jewish people. Chai means life, or you can use the plural, which is often used Chaim, which is like from L'chaim, which a lot of people know because of Fiddler on the Roof. L'chaim, L'chaim, to life. L'chaim. Glad we had a little musical moment there. So, so the number 18 gets associated with life, right? So a lot of times when Jewish folks give money to charity, to tzedakah, it'll be in multiples of 18, just to kind of have that sort of life-affirming number present in your giving. We have at the synagogue in St. Louis 18 sort of windows above in sort of the main gathering room, and that was intentional because of that number meaning. And so you can say 18 plus 1 is even, sort of extra oomph. This is episode 18, which is significant Jewishly, but there's I'm going to do 2 readings if I ever get to them, I know, which is 18 plus 1. So there you have it. So from the left wing, again, I know that people who have watched this at least once sort of know this shtick, I guess, or this prelude. But really quickly, about 10 years ago, I wrote a column, monthly column for the Jewish Federation website. They asked a whole number of St. Louis rabbis to participate and write their own columns and kind of do whatever they wanted with their column. And I gladly accepted, wrote a monthly column for maybe 2.5 years, and I called it From the Left Wing, and wanting to sort of explicate or talk about or enunciate or give examples of what I consider my place on the spectrum of Jewish belief and practice. On the spectrum of Judaism, that's a left to right spectrum or right to left spectrum, and I placed myself then and still do now, and on the left wing, and I'll explain a little bit more about that in a second. On the left wing, and certainly that's just like in the political version of left-right. Left is the most liberal, not necessarily politically liberal, but liberal in terms of open and flexible, whereas the right would be more sort of rigid and inflexible. And I don't think those words are too value laden, rigid and inflexible. I think there might be other words a right wing religious person might use, but I think they would acknowledge that they don't want things to change very much, if at all. So that's kind of rigid and inflexible. I don't know if those are negative terms necessarily. Anyway, whoever wants to do a From the Right Wing sort of broadcast, they can answer all of this. But I'm from the left wing, and so I wrote a bunch of columns that kind of told stories and gave examples and sort of explicated this left-wing place that I feel like I've staked in there as a rabbi and as a Jew and as a human being, a religious human being. It's a spectrum, and so like all spectrums, it goes from left to right, but most of us are somewhere on that spectrum. Not, hard to know who's on the very left end and who's on the very right end, but I'm close to the left edge, for sure, or at least that's the way I identify. So when it comes to left and right, religiously speaking, and specifically Jewishly speaking, as opposed to politically speaking, which there's some crossover, but not total. Although, as I think I teased on Tuesday, there is this one of the columns I'm going to read does have sort of political, more political kind of themes than most of the columns. I didn't really write about politics, hardcore electoral, even politics, some issues, but mostly it was about religious and Jewish life. But left to right, and I think I've already said it enough, more open, more flexible, more, sort of change is much more readily sort of embraced. And on the right, all the opposite of that. When it comes to tradition, especially religious or Jewish tradition, wanting to preserve that as much as possible. And, again, you could be in the right sphere and be open to some change, right? You'd be more like right center or center right. As you get more towards the right, there's less openness to change, to the point where you get close to the right wing, there's very, very, very little, if at all. Same on the left. There's people on the left center who are weary of change, but will accept it, maybe more than someone who's their counterpart in the center right, but certainly would rather, as much as possible, preserve traditions and to not alter traditions and to keep, most of the traditions. And as you get further left, there's much more of a willingness, even a desire for change, for flexibility. And that includes, and this is going to come into play, at least for sure in the second essay, the second column, what does it mean? How does a religious person, a Jewish person, or in any, you name your religion, a Christian person, a Muslim person, a Hindu person, interrelate with people who are of different traditions and different faiths, and how accepting are they of the ideas and customs and ideas, did I say ideas of another faith. So on the left, there's much more of a willingness to have dialogue, oh boy, I think that's the first time that's happened. So I saved a sneeze for the last. Sorry about that. Or bless, or I'm sure out there, if you're watching, you're saying, "Oh, bless you, Randy." So thank you. To dialogue, to maybe acknowledge the other traditions as having validity and truth. More of a pluralistic sort of a sense that there's more than one way to be religious. And as you move to the right, less desire to intermingle and certainly to have programs and to dialogue, and a much less of a willingness to sort of say much positive about the beliefs and customs of traditions other than the person who's holding them. And we'll talk about that after the second reading a little bit. So that's the left, right, and really quickly, I've been trying to make sure I say this too. When it comes to people who are secular, in other words, that don't identify themselves as a religious person at all, even though they might be they might say they have a Jewish or Christian background, or that they might claim that's their ethnicity, but otherwise, they have no religious behavior or attitudes. They don't participate or affiliate. That group of people, which would is a sort of a whole nother conversation, is not part of the spectrum that I'm talking about. The part of the spectrum I'm talking about are people who do sort of affiliate religiously, who do participate, who do consider themselves religious. That's the spectrum from left to right. So a secular person wouldn't be on the far left of this spectrum as I'm kind of explaining it. So that's that was important to say. So on to the two readings, the two essays. This might be a little bit longer of a program. I've been trying to keep it to about a half hour. This might go a little bit longer because I'd like to read one, talk about it a little bit, read the other, talk about it a little bit, and then maybe some closing kind of sort of goodbyes and thoughts about from the left wing. So I wrote the column. Eventually the Federation sort of revamped their website, and the columns, all of them, stopped. I thought about it again when we were going into shelter in place, to staying home, working from home, doing all of our synagogue activities from home via the internet and social media, and thought this would be a nice way to keep connected with whoever wanted to connect. So I grabbed the columns and have them here, in hard copy, and been reading them ever since, every Tuesday and Thursday since mid-April. And now I've no more. Now there might have been, I don't know, there might have been a few more that ran. Oh, there's my printer. I got dogs barking, I got sneezing, and I've got printers printing. So I don't, there's not that much more coming off the printer. Okay. Maybe it's time to I mean, maybe it's definitely time to be done with this for a while. But anyway, there might be a few more that were published or posted, but I didn't have them in my file, and any electronic sort of residue of these columns are hard to find. They were taken off of the CRC website when they were taken down from the Federation website because there was no way to link them. So these are the last two I have, and the first one is called Face to Face, as you can see up there. I have no show and tell for this one, but I do for the last one, so get ready for that. Face to Face. You don't need to be a political junkie like me to sense that our country is extremely polarized. Ever since the disputed election in 2000, the shorthand way to express this liberal-conservative divide is to talk about blue and red. At the Democratic Convention in 2004, Barack Obama demonstrated a desire to bring people together across this divide so that we can begin to better understand one another. He said, "There is not a liberal America and a conservative America. There is the United States of America. We worship an awesome God in the blue states, and we don't like federal agents poking around in our libraries in the red states. We coach Little League in the blue states, and yes, we've got some gay friends in the red states." I truly bawled, and also began to hope that this unknown politician would someday run for president, only at that moment realizing how much impact the enmity had on me. Barack Obama is now our president, but his articulate and impassioned purple vision has yet to come to pass. In fact, the bitterness between left and right is worse than ever. Spend any time as I do on political websites, and you will find that the comments posted by partisans on both sides are shockingly nasty. It scares me to think about all that pent-up disgust people are carrying for their fellow human beings. I have long played with the notion that Jacob and Esau, the warring twins from the Torah, can be seen as red and blue prototypes. Esau, whose other name Edom actually means reddish or earthish, became a skillful hunter, a man of the outdoors, but Jacob was a mild man who stayed at camp. Later commentators took the differences between the two, and portrayed them as extreme stereotypes of polar opposites. The two men were brothers, but hated and feared each other greatly. But my favorite part of their story is the ending. When the brothers finally meet after years of bitter separation, they do not insult one another or come to blows, not even close. In fact, they reconcile through tears and an embrace. Jacob says to Esau, "When I see your face, it is like seeing the face of God." Emmanuel Levinas is a French Jewish philosopher who passed away in 1995. Like many modern theologians, he saw his main task as reframing what it means to believe in God after historical and scientific progress created major doubt as to the origin of scriptures and of life itself. For Levinas, God is the internal and external force that gives us ethical knowledge, the ability to at least identify the optimum ways of treating others. Furthermore, he taught that our best chance at acting on that knowledge was when we truly recognized the faces of others. Recognition, to Levinas, happens when we understand the other not to be part of ourselves, but an independent entity that deserves our care and attention. In this way, to Levinas, seeing the face of others really is seeing the face of God. People are bound to disagree about politics. Our personalities, life experiences, family backgrounds, worldviews, and associations are all different. This results in various people viewing the important events of our day through different prisms. However, the crucial task of coming to some kind of consensus through negotiation cannot happen if we cannot even stand to be in the same room as those on the other side. Like Jacob and Esau, blue and red must figure out ways to look each other in the face and recognize that there is a sincere, well-intentioned person looking back. Without discarding our principles and beliefs, we should try and find merit in, or at least the positive motivations behind, positions with which we disagree. The truth is, we have more in common than we realize, and need one another, like Jacob and Esau. We are incomplete without the gifts and unique perspectives the other provides. So that was Face to Face, and 10 years ago, right? Hasn't gotten better, has it? I think most of us would agree it's gotten worse. I'm sorry about that. I feel horribly about that. But I don't want to talk about that. If people want to discuss it, I'll look at the end on Facebook and see if anybody raises any of these issues. Sorry about that. So, but I do want to say that I guess, the part about this that I want to kind of bring out in terms of the left wing, origin of this column is that Emmanuel Levinas, this philosopher who I kind of used because he talks about face to face, and that went along with, Esau and Jacob looking face to face, even though they were really different. And, is one of those theologians, Jewish theologians, who, is a contemporary theologian who, who wanted Judaism to survive past, antiquity or pre-modernity, and who understood that most modern contemporary or modern people, contemporary in his time in the 20th century, weren't going to be able to be religious if it was just right-wing religion, just traditional, because the traditional beliefs weren't working for many people anymore. As I said, you had Darwin, kind of casting lots of scientific evidence against the way that the Bible, the Torah says that human beings came to be, the origin of the species. You had, biblical scholars sort of, taking apart the idea that God, wrote or spoke the words of the Bible. In Torah, you had all kinds of skepticism and doubt and science and history that was kind of making it really difficult for people that were products of the Enlightenment and Emancipation to be religious in a traditional way. And so he was one of many. Martin Buber was a Jewish theologian in the similar vein, and Abraham Joshua Heschel, and many others that instill to this day, to say, okay, so God can't anymore be, for most of us, that traditional image of a all almighty being sort of judging and ruling and sort of all of that, but we still want religion, and we still want God or godliness, and how do we reframe it? And so one of the ways, and these are all rooted in the tradition, such as, so Levinas said, it's about the face-to-face recognition. That's where we find God. And when we understand, and as I'm saying this as I look into my own face, which is kind of bizarre, but into the face of others, we understand that we have an obligation to treat them ethically, and as God is the source of ethics, God becomes the face of the other, the source of our ethics. So that's face to face. The political part. as I said, has become really, really just worse than problematic and troublesome. And now we're in a pandemic, and our political divide is part of what's hindering us from responding the way we need to get back to normal and to keep each other healthy. It's awful. I remain hopeful, and I do love those words of Barack Obama years before he became president about our commonalities. We just are having lots of trouble finding them. So the very last column, and I'm glad that it's ending on this note. Only in the last few weeks have I thought this could be a good last one, but I'm glad I saved it to last. It's called Holy Ground Hanukkah. Obviously, it's not timely. We're months away from Hanukkah, but I think it ends us on a note of hope and certainly light. So I'm going to read this one. I got a couple pictures to show you after I'm done, and then some conversation. I'll check for comments and questions on Facebook, and then I'll sign off for the final time from the left wing. So here we go. Holy Ground Hanukkah. In the early 20th century, the area in the Central West End around Kings Highway, Boulevard, and Washington Avenue became known as Holy Corners. The designation came about because of the 5 churches and 1 synagogue. The synagogue was Temple Israel, located on or near each of the corners of these blocks. The congregations on the Holy Corners eventually became to participate in interdenominational dialogues and activities with one another. In the early 1960s, Temple Israel moved to its present location in the county, St. Louis County, the suburbs. Rabbi Ferdinand Isserman, saddened at the thought of his synagogue leaving its longtime urban home, wanted to leave a piece of the synagogue in the Holy Corners. So the rabbi took the large decorative brass Hanukkah menorah that had an American eagle atop the Shamish candle holder to St. John's United Methodist Church, across the street from the synagogue, instructing his friend, the church's minister, that he wanted to keep the Hanukkah's light in the neighborhood, keep the light on the neighborhood. I'm going to actually show you right now. That's not it. The picture went away. Oh, that's a bummer. Sorry, guys. I don't have a picture. I had a picture of that menorah, and I lovingly placed it into the scene, and somehow it got deleted. Don't know. That's for later. Okay, well, it's a menorah. It's a big, large Hanukkah. There's an eagle on top, and that's that. Flash forward to the start of this century. Clergy and members of a diverse group of congregations in the same Central West End area met and expressed a common desire to renew the Holy Corners legacy. We formed the Holy Ground Collaborative and dedicated ourselves to fellowship and to working together on projects that would make the neighborhood a better place. Holy Ground consists of a synagogue, CRC, and churches including Unitarian, Christian Science, Progressive Catholic, MCC, which is a denomination for gay and lesbian Christians, African American Baptist, and several other Protestant denominations. Representatives from the congregations meet monthly, and together we have done home repairs for vulnerable residents, served lunch to our homeless neighbors, painted over lead-covered schoolyard fences, and held interfaith concerts and services. All of the congregations are within walking distance, and we all now feel like we belong not only to our own houses of worship, but to the others as well. The neighborhood that houses our congregational buildings now feels like our own as well, regardless of where we actually live. One of our group's founding churches was St. John's, the same church that received Temple Israel's menorah. As soon as we started Holy Ground, the church's pastor, Reverend Wally Shearburn, started the tradition of inviting me to his church on the Sunday of Hanukkah to teach about the holiday and to light the menorah with the traditional blessings. I think about our Holy Ground group a lot during Hanukkah because of the menorah, but also because our interfaith friendships reminds me to appreciate the awesome blessings of religious pluralism, tolerance, and mutual respect. Unlike the majority culture that the Maccabees struggled against, the various Christian congregations that I interact with are not chauvinistic or triumphalistic. They are proud of their own traditions, but they also believe that there is no such thing as a monopoly on truth and righteousness, no one correct way to serve God and humankind. We see ourselves as specific practitioners of a generic religion. Holiness, love, justice, and compassion are the goals for us all, and our various religious theologies, practices, and teachings are simply different, but equally valid routes to reach these goals. In 2007, St. John's was closed by the Methodist order. On the Friday night before the church's last service, Reverend Sherburne walked into CRC, our synagogue, as we were in the middle of our Kabbalat Shabbat service. He was carrying the Hanukkah that Rabbi Isserman had given to the church some 40 years earlier. "This is for you," said our friend Reverend Wally. "We know you'll keep its light on in the neighborhood. And with the help of our brothers and sisters of all faiths, traditions, and races, we will." That was Holy Ground Hanukkah, and I guess we started, I think, with Jewish universalism, and we end with some universalism. This idea, to me, what left-wing religion gives to the world is this notion that each of our religious traditions, the ones that point to justice and peace and love and compassion, which are many, they're just languages, different languages, and that say the same thing. It's nice to have lots of different languages, right? It's rich and interesting and meaningful, and there's things you can say in one language that you can't say in another. So I don't want us all to be one religion or no religion, but I think this idea that there's many traditions, and some of them are religious, and I'm going to say some of them are secular. But it's good to have those sort of specific, particular traditions. It's really good, as long as, in my opinion, they leave room for the others and acknowledge the others, and aren't, the word I used in the essay was triumphalistic. And there is a triumphalism. I'm sorry, there's a triumphalism on the right. Not all the right, but certainly towards the edge of the right. There's a triumphalism that says, my way is the best way, or my way is the only way. And I just don't think that's the way the world works, and I don't think that's the way the world should work, and I don't think that's the way that we get to peace, which is the ultimate goal, which is God's name, Shalom, one of God's names. So that's the deal, that's how I feel like that sums up, to me, the benefit or the gift, the blessing of left-wing religion is, one of the great gifts is this room for everybody. Not just tolerance, which is important, but embrace. So again, if somebody wants to do from the right wing and kind of counter me, that's great. But to me, left-wing religion really is this left-wing religion is a pointer towards the possibility of shalom, not to pit ourselves against each other, and not to deny the existence, and not to look down on, and certainly oppress. Obviously, not oppress and condemn other traditions that aren't our own. So like that, like that Hanukkah, that Holy Ground Hanukkah that got passed from a synagogue to a church back to a synagogue, and we talk about it in different ways, but it still gives light, and light is a symbol of hope. I wanted to show you one more thing. This is in Interfaith Menorah. It's hard to see. I don't even know if I expand. I can't really expand it. But take my word for it. This Interfaith Menorah has symbols on each of the flames of different, traditions. I think I showed you on one of my essays a T-shirt that was sort of similar. But this is a menorah that says that each tradition has its own light, and together, it makes a greater light. And that too is something really, I think another way to talk about it. One of my favorite metaphors, I use the language metaphor. Another one, courtesy of Reb Zalman, wonderful sort of neo-Hasidic Rebbe who really embraced lots of different traditions, especially the mystical forms of all the traditions, secular and religious. He talked about vitamins, and he said that every tradition, every worthwhile tradition, and there are traditions, religious and otherwise, that don't talk about love and peace and holiness and joy and the good stuff. There are, unfortunately, sects and cults and religions who preach hatred and prejudice. So, but there's lots and lots and lots of religious traditions in their own way that talk about the good stuff. So those, Reb Zalman said, all have vitamins, right? And when we sort of we obviously if I'm Jewish, so I've definitely got I take the Jewish vitamin because I keep up with Judaism and I practice Judaism, but then the other ones have vitamins too, and we need more than one vitamin. As I was saying that, I was thinking about a better one of Reb Zalman's, which is organs of the body. That he said, picture each religious tradition, each all the different traditions as different organs in your body. And so for a healthy body, you need all of your organs working well. And when you have to live without an organ, you're less healthy. So if you think of the body in this case as sort of humankind or the world, we need all these organs to be functioning and to be at their best, their most enlightened version of their self, teaching their teachings and doing their spiritual practices, and not to want another one to go away, because that would decrease the health of all. So there you have it, my friends. I'm going to check, actually. I said I would check, and I'm going to check. Hold on one second. All right, I'll check really quickly. I'm going to check really quickly Facebook before I sign off. I can't believe it. Feeling a little funky about this, because I really enjoyed it. I've really enjoyed reading the columns and knowing that there's people out there watching and listening, whether live or it's on the video. I'll tell you a little more about how to find these before I do sign off. But let's see, someone's saying, just some people saying thank you, and they're watching with us, which is great. One more place I can look. I know some of these stories, some of you guys have heard before. They're some of my favorite stories. Thanks, Paul. Paul says it's sad that it's the final essay. I agree. But it's also summer, so maybe a little vacay. Maybe I'll think about it during July and come up with something. Now that I know how to work all this magic, this internet magic, who knows? We'll see. And I have really liked it. So thank you, everybody who's been part of this. These will be, if you scroll enough on Facebook, the Central Reformed Congregation's Facebook page, if you scroll enough down, you'll find each of these back to April. I don't think they go away for a long time, but you have to scroll more and more as it gets more distant. But even easier is YouTube. So we have a CRC YouTube channel that more in a more organized way sort of categorizes all of the things we do and then saves the video. So you can look up Torah study and you'll see oodles and oodles of in chronological order the Torah studies. You'll and from the left wing is one of those from the left wing is also one of those categories. So if you go to YouTube and search for a Central Reform Congregation, within that channel, you'll see From the Left Wing, and then you'll see all 18 episodes, sort of, in, I don't know if this is the right way to say it, descending chronological order, meaning this most recent one will be first, all the way down to, the number one in April. And if you missed one, or you want to see one again, or whatever, you can access them that way. So they'll be around. Won't be going live anymore, and I'm out of columns. And honestly, I could it'd be nice to write a column again, but there's not much different, I would say. I have different stories and examples, but boy, the way I thought back 10 years ago, I guess this isn't a surprise. I am 56 years old, so it's not like going to have an epiphany. I might, but most of my ideology, my philosophy, it has largely, sort of remained constant. I'm still from the left wing, and I, although I'm staring at myself, I know that you're out there, and I want to tell you I care about you all and love you all, and I miss you all, your physical presence. Really quickly, because it's the weekend, there is going to be, if you right where you're watching on Facebook, our Friday evening service at 6 p.m. I believe the rabbis Bogard are going to be leading the Friday evening service at 6. And then Saturday, there's Torah study at 9. I think it's Rabbi Jim doing Torah study. At 10, I'm coming on to do family services, children's services. And then at 10:30 is our Saturday morning service, which all the rabbis will be there for that. And because Ray Slavin, Dr. Ray, wonderful, wonderful, wonderful CRC member and longtime member, he, in honor of his 90th birthday, which is coming on Monday. So those of you who don't know CRC and don't know St. Louis, Ray is amazing, and he's going to be 90. And in honor of his 90th birthday, he's chanting Torah and giving a Devar Torah, a commentary on the Torah portion, which is a good one. It's Korach, the rebellion portion. So that's the weekend. Oh, Saturday night, I believe at 8 is Rabbi Susan, Rabbi Jim doing Havdalah. So there's your Shabbat for you, starting tomorrow all the way through Saturday night. Still adult education going on. Check the CRC website for different opportunities. Stay well. Take care of yourselves. Take care of each other. Take care of the world. I still am trying to throw my arms around the world, in the words of Bono from U2. And it's been really nice to have this sort of, I called it at the beginning, a new old or an old new sort of experience. Old because the columns are 10 years old, but new because I'm reading them again, and new because the format isn't written, but it's video, or live feed and video. But I've enjoyed this new old / old new sort of program, and feel free to email me if you want to kind of carry this conversation into the future. And I look forward to when it's safe that we can all actually really be together. And for those of you who I don't know, who don't know me, who just kind of happen to find it, hope to meet you in person one of these days. And lots of love to you and yours. And so one more time, I'm from the left wing. So there's my left wing. I'm Rabbi Randy, and I've really enjoyed this. I hope that you have too.